Hey everybody, Julie Quinn here. I want to teach you how to read an academic document. This is a document that was found in the library databases. It's about technology, distraction, and student performance. My 111 students read this as part of a broader discussion about technology in the classroom. And I want to show you how to read this academic document. I know when students first open it, they tend to panic. They're like, oh my God, you want me to read 46 pages? Well, not exactly. There are different ways for undergraduate students to engage in or to take part, to listen in on these academic conversations as they work toward concept mastery. And it doesn't mean you have to read all 46 pages. If you actually look, the length is deceiving. So let me remind everybody that there is a process of reading an academic document. The first one starts with the web search. You're avoiding Google and you're going into library databases. You're searching on your topic. Imagine technology in the classroom was this topic. And you gather, you choose peer reviewed, you choose within a certain window of time, say 2015 to 2021 when I'm making this video. That's 6 years. That's a decent amount of time. Technology certainly changes quickly. You don't want to go to the 1980s or the 1990s. You want to talk and research more recent texts. You find your text by title. You start with title, and then the next thing you do is read the abstract. In this case, we've got an abstract right here. It's just a paragraph long, and the abstract is the paper in miniature, usually around 250 words or less. What's this text about, and is it related to my research? The abstract gives you a quick glimpse to determine relevance, and if it's not really on your topic, or say your topic's the United States, but the abstract focuses on Abu Dhabi, then you get to determine, this is not the right paper for me. So the abstract helps you determine whether you should read the entirety of a text. The next step, introduction and conclusion. Remember, as we write academic essays, the introduction and conclusion are sort of like cousins that have a fair resemblance to one another. The introduction warms the reader up, provides some interesting data, often, and then has an argumentative position. We call that the thesis statement. A conclusion will restate that thesis in a fresh way to allow the ideas to sink in and then give readers food for thought, like action points. What do we do from here? Where should the research go? What's next? So introduction warms the reader up, a conclusion lets the reader go, and they both state the main argument with some unique phrasing across introduction and conclusion. An undergraduate reader should read deeply the introduction and conclusion. What you'll find is that's not particularly long. So of the first 2 pages, you've read 1 paragraph, which is the abstract, and now you're reading 1-2 pages of an introduction. Absolutely manageable for an undergraduate, especially if you're a freshman. Now, there are other sections of academic essays that you want to become familiar with, but doesn't mean that you're going to have to memorize any of this content. Related literature is another way of saying literature review. And a literature review, all it does is it says, these researchers, Beland and Murphy, are our authors, right? Louis-Philippe Beland and Richard Murphy. They're saying other researchers on this topic have found the related literature. And this term literature is not fiction. It's not novel writing. It's the texts within the field of educational research in this context. So they're saying, here's what other researchers have found, and this is great. So again, the section is called Related Literature or Literature Review. And you can skim this. I think it's important to see, though, that if you're doing academic research and you find that there's other fairly recent, some of these are a little bit older, but we've got Fryer's 2014, which is fairly recent. We've got Levine et al.'s 2013 and Lee et al.'s 2014, which are also fairly recent. And if it's a topic that's directly related to your research, well, now you've got a trail of additional articles that then you can look up, because if you flip to the references, you'll find the full name of their article and what journal it was published in, and then you can go into the library databases and find those articles. So this is nice. This is related research, but you can skim it. But I think it's important to give it at least a good skim. Now, the next section is often a methodology section, and it says, this is the research we did. These are primary researchers. They're either setting up sort of some lab environment, or they're anthropologists doing participant observation, or they're doing surveys and different types of interviews. Maybe they're doing a meta-analysis. They're looking at the analysis of all these other groups, and they're gathering all that data together, and they're making broader arguments. There's all sorts of ways one can set up a study, and academic writers explain this. This is exactly how many people we studied. This is the how we set this up. And the idea is for transparency. You want other academic experts to look at your study and say, yeah, that looks legitimate. The way they gather data seems honest and straightforward, that there are no ethical concerns. And so they lay out exactly how they found their data. You can skim this. It's good to skim this because over time you'll understand it even more. Some SEN status and FSM eligibility, like some of the key terms you may not be aware of because you may not be an expert in educational research right now as an undergraduate student, but that's okay. You'll also see terms related to another country because this high school research was done in Great Britain. And then they explained all the different, they did the mobile phone surveys, they did and then discussions of mobile phone use. And the empirical strategy, skim it. You're not reading this deeply because there are equations that may look like Klingon for you. And you don't want to get bogged down by this and become stressed and frustrated. This is how they tabulated their results from the surveys and from all of the other data that they gathered. This is for the experts. This is not so much for us. I mean, I have a PhD and this is very hard for me to follow because this sort of quantitative documentation is not my field of expertise, but that's okay. So you skim it. Now, results. This is something you want to read a little bit more deeply, but note that within the results there may be some tables. Well, I think the tables are actually in this article in appendix, but sometimes within the results you'll see some tables. Just do your best. You're an academic writer getting exposure to a new language, and the language is academic writing experts to experts. And so some of this and some of the symbols related to some of the discussion may be confusing. And so you're like, standard deviation, what is that? If you print these articles out as you're reading the important sections and you leave notes in the margins, then you can ask your professor. You can look up these terms in the dictionary. You're growing your academic vocabulary. I think it's a really important way to engage more deeply with the text. Remember, we read deeply the abstract, the introduction, the results, and the conclusion. So we're not reading deeply the entire text, but we're reading portions of it. Some of these sections may be a little bit confusing because there's still some equations, so skim the confusing parts. And then at some point you're going to get to a multi-paragraph conclusion. Read this deeply. Remember, it mirrors the introduction. So abstract, introduction, any results, discussion, conclusion. But the data gathering, all of that, you skim it. And you'll notice that when you add all of the reading up together, we get to the conclusion. We're only on page 18 and we've skimmed quite a bit of it. You've probably, and then the first 2 pages there's 1 paragraph that you read. So really that's 16 pages. Maybe a student would read 7 or 8 pages pretty deeply here. Then the rest of this are those references that I mentioned and their data presented in visual form with the tables and the graphs. And you can actually even see examples of the, I think somewhere in here, they have the list of the questions that the survey presented. There we go. Appendix A, mobile phone survey questionnaire. So of course you can skim the entirety of this, but if you're only reading 15 or 16 pages, it feels much less overwhelming than if you open this and say, oh my God, it's 46 pages. Well, it's not. Abstract, introduction, results discussion, conclusion. Everything else you skim. And if you have any questions on this process, let me know. I hope that this helps you with your research. It helps make it seem manageable, and you reach out if you have any questions.